May is that month where we can finally start transplanting our vegetables outside, whether you've grown them from seed or you bought them as seedlings at a nursery. But there's actually 21 vegetables that you can direct sow into your garden in May. So I'm going to take you through all of those, especially if you would prefer to sow seeds directly outside because you didn't have space to grow seeds indoors or you don't have the funds to be buying seedlings from a nursery. Don't worry, there's still 21 options for you, which is a ton. So I'm going to take you through all of those. This includes herbs, flowers, and vegetables. I'm going to take you through what seeds to be sowing indoors in May, because that does exist, and a really quick list of all of the plants that can be transplanted outside. If you're new here, my name is Bree from Urban Gardening Canada, and I garden in Ottawa, Zone 5. Especially here in Ontario, May is the kickoff time for gardening. A lot of times people wait until the May long weekend to be able to plant, but really what you're looking for is your temperatures that the nighttime stays around that 10 degrees Celsius mark. 8 degrees is okay, 12 degrees is totally fine, but your average is around that 10 degrees Celsius nighttime mark regularly is when it means it's time to be planting all of your vegetables outside. You can start your seeds a little bit earlier than that because they will just wait until the weather starts warming up, but since your soil is warm, you can be getting these into the ground anytime during May, and of course the earlier the better if you have the right temperatures. But if you're up north in a zone 3 or in the territories, you're definitely going to be waiting, so that will be more end of May for you. But if you're anywhere in the more warmer regions of Canada or in the US, then now is a great time to be sowing these seeds. So I'm going to start with which seeds to sow indoors first, because there's only one, so it's really quick to get through it, and that is Brussels sprouts. So maybe you've started your Brussels sprouts already, but technically you're going to want to be starting them now in May because they are a fall vegetable. So they're going to taste best when the weather is cold, or if they're going to get hit by a frost. It helps bring out the sweetness in them. And so planting them indoors right now is going to help you make sure that you plant them out later in the season, which gives them that longer growing period with the cooler temperatures in the fall and not in the heat of the summer. And that's everything for the indoor stuff super quick. So let's talk about the vegetables that you are going to direct sow outside. Now, some of these you may have started inside, so you can either choose to also direct sow outside for succession planting, or you can choose to not plant them. It's up to you if you've chosen to start them inside, but if you haven't, the first one are bush beans or pole beans. So generally you don't start these inside. You can if you wanted to get a bit of a head start, and they're a great succession sowing plant. However, I choose to direct sow mine because that is how I find they grow the best, and they grow so quickly when you plant them into germination that there's really no point in spending any time growing them inside first. If you are growing bush beans, you can succession sow these every few weeks, especially if you love beans. But if you are not a huge bean fan, I don't recommend planting too many because they are super productive. And if you are growing pole beans, just make sure that you give them a place to grow. Because they are pole beans, it means that they grow vertical and they need some kind of trellis or support in order to grow and produce their fruit. Next up is edamame or soybeans. These are my absolute favorite, and you're going to want to wait to sow these until it's a little bit warmer out because they do really love that heat. But these are a perfect direct sow plant, and the bunnies really like the greens of them. So you're going to want to protect these ones when you first sow them in the ground because you don't want them all to get eaten up. And these ones are perfect for if you love a good snack, like you get maybe if you go out to a sushi restaurant and you get a nice edamame appetizer. You do not know how good they taste until you grow them yourself at home. So I highly recommend buying the seeds and direct sowing them this month in May. All right, next up is zucchini. You may have started these indoors, hopefully not too soon because they grow so large, but zucchini is another really good one to direct sow. And not only can you sow it in May, but you can also attempt to sow it again in June, because if you get really bad cucumber beetles by sowing your zucchini later in the season in the beginning of June, there is a good chance that you can miss that first population of the cucumber beetles coming through, where you'll be able to grow a zucchini plant without the cucumber beetle damage that's coming with it. And so this is another really good one to direct sow if you have space in your garden, or if you haven't had a chance to start it inside, don't worry about it. You can plant it directly outside. And along the same lines is cucumbers. This is another one where some people actually find their cucumbers do better when they direct sow them outside versus starting them inside. And cucumbers also need a trellis or something vertical to grow up. So make sure wherever you plant your cucumbers that you are giving them that support structure to grow. And again, you can try and sow them in May and again in June. So that way, by the time your June plants have grown up larger, they will not have the risk of the cucumber beetles the way that your May or your indoor sown cucumber plants have. All right, the next grouping of plants are cold season crops. And so technically you could have direct sown these ones in April, but if you haven't gotten around to it yet, don't worry about it. You can still do them now. And the first one is broad beans. I absolutely love these. I think you should plant them. If you haven't bought seeds yet, go out and get them. These are such an amazing crop to be growing, and they are such a good cool season crop that you can start them in April or early May. So that way you get a early harvest of food and you'll eat the bean inside of them, and they're a really good source of protein, and because they're cool season it means you get early access to food, and then you get to plant them again in the fall, which is amazing. The next one is lettuce. Even if you started these indoors, you're going to want to direct sow lettuce outside because of that succession planting. By the time that you transplant your indoor lettuce out and start harvesting off of it, your direct sown lettuce seeds will have just started to sprout, which means when you are done with the first round of lettuce, another round has been started. And so this is a great way to make sure that you have lettuce throughout the season and not just in early spring. And this is the same for spinach. So starting your spinach by direct sowing that outdoors too, especially in early May, you're still capturing that cool season weather and you're allowing yourself to get that succession sowing from the spinach that you started inside to the spinach that you've direct sown. All right, the next three are root crops, and that is carrots, beets, and radishes. They also like the cool weather, so it's okay to be planting them right away in early May. So even if you live in a zone 3 or in the territories, as long as your snow is melted and your soil is workable, then you could be planting your carrots, your beets, and your radishes. And so these are a great one to be doing now, and they don't do well being sown indoors and transplanting outside, so these are always going to be a direct sow option, even if you get them on a nice rainy day so that the rain can water the garden for you. And then once they start sprouting, you're going to want to prick them out to make sure that you have enough space for all of them to grow. And the final vegetable before we get into herbs is peas. You can have direct sown them in April, but if you're doing them in early May, who cares? It's still a good time to be doing it. And again, peas also like to grow vertical, so just make sure that you provide them with a trellis or some kind of device that they can grow vertical up. And then soon you will have fresh garden peas, which are my absolute favorite vegetable to be eating fresh in the springtime, and so these are a must-have in any garden. And so let's talk about the herbs that you can direct sow. Cilantro, basil, and dill are all good direct sow vegetables. Basil likes the heat, and so later in May is a good time to be direct sowing it when the temperatures have gone up higher, and in the beginning of May, having cilantro and dill going out in the garden are a great one to start with because they like that cool weather and they're so simple to sow. You can just spread the seeds around broadly and then cover them lightly and give them a good water, and that's all it takes to be able to get some fresh herbs early in the springtime. Now, before I get into the direct sow flowers, I did want to mention my course that I have available for you. More and more gardeners are struggling with unpredictable weather, pests that just won't quit, and crops that used to thrive but suddenly won't grow. That's what my course is all about. It teaches home gardeners like you how to build a stronger, more resilient garden that can handle whatever nature throws at you. With grocery prices through the roof, more people are turning to their gardens to save money and feed their families. But what happens when your garden stops producing like it used to? In my course, I teach you how to grow a stronger, more reliable garden that can survive unpredictable weather, pests, and other challenges so you don't lose your food to forces you can't control. I'll leave a link to my course in the description below, where there's also a free preview where you can get a couple of the lectures for free, so why not take advantage? Check that out below, and I look forward to seeing you in my course. Now let's get into the flowers that you can direct sow outside, and the first one is calendula. Calendula likes the cool weather, so planting it it in early May is perfectly fine, even if the weather hasn't warmed up quite yet. So that would be the very first one that you want to be sowing. It makes beautiful daisy-like flowers that are also really good for your skin. So it's both a useful flower for pollinators, but also for you if you want to turn it into any kind of salve. All right, next up is cornflowers or blue boys. These are a really wonderful flower for pollinators, and they come in a nice selection from blues to whites to pinks to purples. They're such a fun flower to be growing, and they do really well when you direct sow them outside. So you're going to want to just splay them out all over your garden and lightly cover them and give them some water, and they'll pop up in no time. Next up is nasturtium, which is my favorite flower to companion plant in my raised garden beds, and I do direct sow these. You can start them inside, but it's just not necessary. And so what I like to do is direct sow them in my raised beds right along the edges of the garden, so that way they can billow out and grow outwards, so they can be both eaten, enjoyed as the flowers, but they also provide this really beautiful billowing look as they're growing outside of the garden beds, and it just gives a nice vibe to the gardens. And so that's my favorite way to be planting them without them taking over the entire garden. And next up is Alyssum. This one also does way better direct sown outside. And so this also does the same kind of features where it creates this big carpet of flowers and can billow out over the edge of your garden, or if you have a retaining wall, which is where I like to plant mine. And what I love about Alyssum is that it brings in parasitic wasps, and these are really important as beneficial insects that help you fight against tomato hornworms, because they lay their eggs inside of the tomato hornworm where they eat their way back out, and so it kills the hornworm and also helps promote more parasitic wasps. So this is why I make sure to keep Alyssum in all of my gardens. The next up is poppies. Poppies just do so much better direct sown than they do being started indoors and transplanted outside. Although to me, this is all lore because I've never been able to get poppies to grow other than a couple in the middle of my sidewalk cracks. I'm terrible at poppies, but the theory is that these ones get direct sown outside and they will take root and grow for you. So I threw a couple out in my garden, and I'm gonna see, I had very little left of this beautiful black peony poppy, and so I'm really hoping that it's going to germinate because it was stunning, but there's no guarantees, but we'll see what happens. And the final one is sunflowers. You can start these ones inside, but they're also just as easy to start outside. One thing that you want to do when you're direct sowing your sunflowers outside is to protect the seeds, because first of all, birds love to eat sunflower seeds, but also as the plant starts to grow, squirrels also like to eat the sunflower seedlings. So when you do plant them out, you just want to make sure that you give them some protection until they're large enough to survive any kind of attack from a squirrel. Although all my sunflowers always get the entire head ripped off from squirrels and don't really survive. So if you're able to grow sunflowers without horrible squirrel damage, then very exciting for you, and these ones are going to go out now. All right, so like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, if your nighttime temperatures are hovering around that 10 degrees Celsius mark, that means everything that you've grown indoors can now be planted outside, as long as you've hardened them off properly. So the process of hardening off your plants is where you're bringing them to outdoor conditions, because of course your indoor lights and temperatures doesn't reflect what actually is happening outside. They're used to a balmy 20 degrees Celsius day and night time, and the lights are never going to be as strong as actual sunlight is. So if you don't harden your plants off properly, A, you can sunburn your plants, and yes, they actually get sunburned, and B, the wind can crack any of the stems if they're not used to the wind, and C, the temperature changes from day to night are enough that it could kill your plants or burst the cells inside of your plants. I already had that happen to a couple of my cauliflower that I was trying to harden off earlier this springtime, and so it's really important that you take the time to properly harden off your plants before you transplant them outside. So depending on the conditions in your garden area, hardening off can take anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks, so you do want to make sure that you plan accordingly based off the weather, that you get them out when the daytime temperatures are nice, and that way when it warms up and they're ready to be planted outside, they're already ready to go. So if it If you have hardened off your plants properly and the temperatures at nighttime are staying above 10 degrees, then you are ready to go and you can plant out all of your plants like celery, eggplants, peppers, tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchinis, any of those heat-loving plants. All of those can go out. Your lettuce, your kale, your Swiss chard, your basil, your cilantro, your dill. There's all of them. They're all ready to go. Melon, squash, which is why May is such a fun time. And if you are growing flowers inside, your zinnias, cosmos, status, straw flower, all of these also like the warm temperatures. So just make sure that you're hardening off those as well and waiting to plant those outside until the temperatures warm up. And that is everything, which is a ton of stuff. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in this video here. Bye.